He has been standing outside her house since week 1. He has sources inside this investigation that no other reporter in the country has managed to get. He has published more original, on-the-scene reports than any other national media outlet. And for 3 months, while the whole world speculated, this single journalist quietly pieced together what those actually investigating the case knew. Then, in May 2026, someone asked him the question directly. The very question that had been shaking the internet for 3 months. The suspicion surrounding Nancy Guthrie's own daughter, Annie, and her husband, Tommaso. And his reply was a single sentence, short, blunt, and absolutely irrefutable. A sentence that should have ended the entire debate immediately. We will tell you exactly what Brian Entin said, word for word. But not just yet. Because if I tell you now, you won't understand why it matters so much. To understand its significance, you must first grasp what they did to this family, and who was really behind it. Because what happened in Tucson, Arizona, in the early hours of February 1st, 2026, was no accident. This wasn't an elderly woman getting lost in the night. It was planned, coldly executed, and it left a mysterious trail that forensic investigators are still patiently unraveling, thread by thread, to this very day. And before this video ends, you'll understand why the most trusted voice in this case said what he said, and why he points directly at the one person almost everyone stopped looking for. If you want facts and not the noise, subscribe right now. Let's begin. Before understanding what they took, you must know who they took. Nancy Guthrie was no mere footnote in her daughter's television career. She was an 84-year-old woman living independently in Catalina Foothills, a very quiet neighborhood in Tucson. She had a routine, a community, and a faith she practiced every Sunday morning through a virtual church service. She had 3 adult children, named Savannah, Annie, and Cameron, and was an active part of her family's daily life. Not on the sidelines, but right at the center. She lived about 10 minutes away from her daughter Annie and her husband, Tommaso. That closeness mattered. It meant family dinners weren't rare events that had to be scheduled into busy calendars. They were common, routine, the kind of relationship that exists in millions of American families, where a parent lives so close they can drop by without it being a special occasion. On the night of January 31st, Nancy went to dinner and played games with Annie and Tommaso. She didn't drive. She took an Uber, a detail in the official file that reveals a lot about how she operated. Independent but connected. Self-sufficient, but never isolated. Inside her home, she had 2 tech devices that would become key to this entire investigation. A doorbell camera at the front entrance and a pacemaker in her chest, a heart device linked in real time to her doctors. That pacemaker wasn't just a simple medical device. In the hours following her disappearance, it became one of the most vital forensic clues in the investigation, not because of what it recorded, but because of the exact moment it went silent. Think about it. An 84-year-old woman, alone, with a device whose only purpose is to tell the world her heart is still beating. Whoever came for her that night knew enough to disable the camera before stepping in front of it. They came prepared. They fully understood that electronic systems record everything that happens right in front of them. What they didn't count on, what they couldn't completely erase, was what police uncovered in the surviving data. Here is the timeline, and every single second counts. At 9:48 that night, the garage door opened. Tommaso had driven her home after dinner. She went inside. At 9:50, the garage door closed again. Tommaso watched it close from the driveway, and then drove off into the quiet Tucson night. That was the last confirmed sighting of Nancy Guthrie at her home. The neighborhood fell asleep, and in the darkness, someone began to move. At 1:47 in the morning, the main front doorbell camera was completely disconnected, not because of a power outage or a dead battery. It was intentionally cut by someone who knew it was there and came ready to silence it before showing their face. Think about what that requires. You have to know that the camera is there. You must know exactly where it is installed and how to disable it before it captures you. That is not instinct. It is research. Someone had been watching this house. At 2:12 in the morning, something unexpected for the intruder surfaced in the forensics. Even though the camera was off and Nancy did not have an active recording subscription, digital forensics later managed to recover residual data from the internal system. Fragments, motion signals, system logs that kept running after the live stream went dark. At 2:12, the residual data registered movement inside the house. The trace of someone who thought they had vanished completely. They had not. And at 2:28 in the morning, the cardiac signal from Nancy's pacemaker went silent. The connection between her device and the tracking app was cut off, matching the exact moment Nancy was physically taken away from the range of the phone left in her house. 3 electronic systems shutting down in sequence over 41 minutes. A camera, a motion sensor, a heartbeat. This is not chaos. It is a step-by-step plan executed by someone who understood what each device recorded and tried to bypass them one by one. The next afternoon, Sunday, February 1st, Nancy did not show up for her virtual church service. Her friends noticed the empty square where her face should have been. They called, but nobody answered. They tried again, with no success. They contacted her family, and at 11:56 in the morning, several relatives arrived at the house. What they found did not look like a home someone had just walked away from. Nancy's phone was inside. Her purse, too. The kind of belongings an 84-year-old woman would never leave behind willingly were left right where they would be if she had no choice. At 12:03 in the afternoon, they called 911. The police arrived at 12:15, and the moment they began to analyze the scene, the entire case started to shift. The back doors of the house were left unlocked and slightly open, deliberately propped open with Nancy's own flower pots, items taken from the home and repositioned to secure an escape route. The more you think about that detail, the more disturbing it becomes. Whoever slipped inside did not panic. They opened the back door, secured it, and left themselves a clear path out, methodical, unhurried, operating on a timeline mapped out long before they ever set foot on the property. And on the front porch, investigators recovered biological evidence. Later, DNA testing confirmed it belonged to Nancy Guthrie. By February 2nd, it was official. Authorities confirmed that Nancy was taken from her home against her will. On February 5th, the FBI released the doorbell camera footage. It showed an armed suspect, face covered, carrying a backpack, with a weapon clearly visible outside Nancy's door. That person has never been identified, never named, and never found. Yet, within 48 hours of the video going public, the internet had already stopped looking at the masked figure. Its attention had shifted somewhere else entirely. That is how fast everything was moving. By February 4th, 72 hours after Nancy's disappearance was confirmed, and 48 hours after the FBI released the footage of the armed suspect, the digital world had already forgotten him. They had already found their suspects. And it was not the armed stranger with his face covered. Instead, it was a grieving daughter and her husband, Annie Guthrie and Tommaso. The theory gained traction with a speed and certainty that had nothing to do with evidence, but purely with proximity. They were the last 2 people to see Nancy before she vanished. That is a fact. Tommaso drove her home. That is a fact. He saw the garage door close before he left. Also a fact. Those 3 details became the foundation upon which thousands of strangers built an elaborate tower of accusations. A narrative that grew day by day, built out of thin air using details no investigator had ever released. No documents, no confirmed leaks, and absolutely no official statements from the police. Proximity was the motive. The garage was the crime scene. Footage of a man dropping off his mother-in-law after a family dinner became a puzzle that online strangers decided they could solve. How long did he wait before driving away? Did he look back at the house suspiciously? Was his body language at press conferences too cold or not emotional enough? The analysis was endless, and their standard of proof was impossible to refute. When the conclusion is already decided, every clue either confirms it or becomes suspicious for not doing so strongly enough. Discussions on Reddit multiplied, while Facebook groups dedicated to the theory exploded overnight. Content creators with no case files, no sources, and zero ties to those involved began posting long, definitive videos, selling suspicion as analysis and rumors as facts. Interest spiked. The algorithm rewarded certainty, and the audience exploded. Let me be blunt here, someone needs to say this without holding back. Most of those creators knew exactly what they were doing. They knew there was zero evidence. They knew the family was clean, but blaming a grieving daughter pulled more clicks than admitting the truth. That the only real suspect had to be a masked stranger whom nobody could identify. They chose clicks. They monetized a family's worst nightmare, and they did it knowing the truth. Through all of this, Annie and Tommaso maintained complete public silence. No statements, no press conferences, no replies online. They only appeared alongside Savannah and Cameron in family statements. United, cooperative, and entirely focused on finding Nancy. They handed over everything the authorities asked for, absorbing the accusations in silence, because they simply lacked a platform big enough to defend themselves. And then, they seized Annie's car. The theory did not just grow, it completely exploded. Annie Guthrie's blue Honda CR-V was seized by the Pima County Sheriff's Department right at the start of the investigation. They did not just search it on the street and return it. It was impounded, sitting in police custody for weeks. To the thousands already convinced, this was not standard forensic procedure. It was a confession. It was the police quietly confirming what the internet had already decided. But that narrative was dead wrong, and those most qualified to explain why said so, publicly and clearly. Retired FBI Special Agent Jennifer Coffindaffer addressed the car directly, and her explanation turns the whole theory upside down. She explained that investigators likely kept the car to determine if someone had planted a tracker on it before the night of January 31st. Think about that. If the person who took Nancy planned this, watching her and learning her daily routines, one of the most effective ways to know exactly when Nancy would be at Annie's and when she would head home would be to track Annie's car. She drove that route, and she was at the dinner. Monitoring that vehicle would tell you almost everything you needed to know. So they might have held the car not because Annie did anything, but because someone used it without her knowledge, as a tool to track her own mother to her death. The car didn't prove family guilt. It proved they were being stalked. Coffindaffer also pointed out routine procedures. A modern vehicle is a data vault, packing location, history, recording speeds, when doors were opened, and precise sensor timestamps. Physically, it can hold trace evidence like fibers, hair, and soil. In major abductions, any vehicle linked to the victim's final movements is secured before the evidence degrades. Retired Pima County Lieutenant Bob Krygier, with nearly 3 decades of service, confirmed that very same logic. Holding a vehicle in an open case is just standard methodology. It says absolutely nothing about the guilt of the person registered to the vehicle. By March, reports surfaced that the vehicle was in the process of being returned to the family, a detail that received only a fraction of the attention the seizure did. A pre-drawn conclusion rarely pauses to process facts that would force it to backtrack. Then, 2 new developments emerged, and online theorists circled them like blood in the water. The first is deeply concerning. The second is entirely new. The first involves a Pima County sergeant named Aaron Cross. On his own segment for Brian Entin Investigates, the reporter interviewed Sergeant Aaron Cross. He is also the president of the Pima County Deputies Organization. Entin asked him about the family's public stance. Savannah Guthrie said in her interview with Hoda Kotb that the family made it clear early on Nancy wouldn't just walk away. Cross said something different. His exact words were, "That is not the information I got today. I heard the family believed she was out there, that she walked away." This directly contradicted the family's public narrative. The family insisted Nancy would never just leave, but a sergeant on the case claimed they initially believed she walked off on her own. Now, this is where we look at facts, not noise. Later, Cross issued a correction. He reached out to Parade magazine to clarify that he had made a mistake. He claimed he actually meant the family originally thought Nancy might have been voluntarily transported to a hospital, not that she had wandered off on her own. So, which one is it? A simple, honest mistake by an officer who got the details wrong, or a telling slip-up they rushed to cover up? The honest answer is that there is no public evidence showing Cross's correction was anything more than fixing a genuine mistake. But it's easy to see exactly what the internet did with a statement that was later retracted. Because, to an already suspicious public, a contradiction followed by an amendment doesn't look like a simple correction. It looks more like backtracking, and the original message had already circled the globe before the correction could ever catch up to it. There is a real lesson hidden in this episode, one far bigger than Cross's statement itself. In such a highly watched case, every word an officer says publicly is recorded, clipped into video, and spun into opposing narratives in a matter of hours. A sergeant's casual slip-up becomes the cornerstone of an online conspiracy theory before the day ends, and clarifying it does absolutely nothing. This is why investigators are so cautious when speaking publicly, not because they are hiding some kind of guilt, but because they know a single sloppy phrase can cause months of irreparable harm to real, innocent people. The Cross incident clearly shows why the Pima County Sheriff's Department, heavily criticized for its silence, started acting this way in the first place. The second event was far quieter and more human. On April 6, 2026, Savannah Guthrie returned to the Today Show for the first time since her mother's kidnapping. She sat in her chair, looked straight into the camera, and said, "Good morning. Welcome to Today, on this Monday morning. We're glad you're starting the week with us, and it's good to be home. It's so good to be home." Contrast those words with the harsh reality. Savannah was home, at her desk, in her chair, back to the life she built. But her 84-year-old mother was not there. She was still missing. Somewhere. Still lost. On the internet, of course, they analyzed even this. Was she too calm, too professional? How could she go back to work with her mother missing? But honestly, what did they expect her to do? Sit alone in a dark room and walk away from the very platform keeping her mother's name in the national conversation? Savannah returning to that desk was not a sign of indifference. In fact, it was the most powerful tool the family had to keep the search alive. This was the narrative the internet built. A seized car, a contradicting sergeant, and a daughter back at her desk. 3 twisted facts spun to put 2 devastated people on trial in the court of public opinion. Yet, an official record ran parallel to it all. In February, Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos issued an official written statement, not some casual offhand comment, but a formal declaration backed by his office. His words were, "To be clear, the Guthrie family, including siblings and spouses, has been completely ruled out as suspects in this case. The family has been extremely cooperative and gracious, and they are the true victims in this entire situation. To suggest otherwise is not only incorrect, but cruel. The Guthries are victims here, plain and simple. Look at the wording, including siblings and spouses. Deliberate and precise. It covers every single member of the family circle. Savannah, Annie, Cameron, and Tommaso, the son-in-law, placed right at the center of all the suspicion. Every single one of them cleared. And then, the sheriff did something law enforcement rarely ever does. He made a moral judgment in writing, using the word cruel. Sheriffs do not normally go beyond the evidence to call out social media. When one does, it means something. Former SWAT officer Chad Ayers added another piece, reporting on a national broadcast that every immediate family member had passed lie detector tests, every single one, including Tommaso. The official record was clear. The sheriff's letter, the polygraphs, the car explanation, all pointing in the exact same direction. Yet the content kept posting. Those threads stayed active, because by then, the conspiracy was no longer just a theory. It was a product, complete with followers and constant engagement. It had the momentum of content that rewards outrage over accuracy. And that is when Brian Entin spoke up. For 3 months, Brian Entin was the sole anchor in serious coverage, serving as senior national correspondent for News Nation, the reporter who covered the Gabby Petito case and shaped public opinion, the journalist who traveled to Tucson and chose to stay, standing outside Nancy's house when the press conferences ended and the other cameras packed up. And that is exactly what makes Brian Entin's voice carry so much weight. He is not a reporter who bows to authority, nor does he just repeat whatever a sheriff says. In fact, during those days, Entin publicly called out the Pima County Sheriff, who claimed the investigation was moving forward clearly. When the department suggested they were close at the 100-day mark, Entin did not stay silent, he questioned them. His exact words were, "My sources do not feel they are close," and he even admitted there might be information he could not access. That does not mean they are not working tirelessly behind the scenes, but he refused to parrot the official optimism. That is journalist Brian Entin. He confronts, he questions, and he seeks the truth. He offers no false hope to anyone. So when that reporter, always willing to challenge the sheriff, was asked directly about Annie Guthrie and Tommaso Cioni, his answer was, no simple press release. It was the culmination of 3 months of the deepest, most thoroughly documented investigation anyone in the country had conducted on this case. Analyzing the suspicions surrounding the family, he stated bluntly, "I have never seen any evidence that anyone in the family is involved." That was it. A single sentence that should have put an end to everything. He did not say, "I have not seen anything public yet," or "nothing is confirmed," or even "we are waiting for more information." He maintained he has never seen evidence, a definitive statement in the present tense. After 3 months of active investigative journalism on one of the country's most closely watched cases, involving the Pima County Sheriff's Department, the FBI, the Border Patrol, and regional search teams, the reporter with the most access to all that data found absolutely nothing pointing to the family. Not a shred of paper, not a single credible lead. But then he went further. The sheriff made it clear they are not suspects, they are cleared. So I think we should leave it at that. And coming from a reporter who had already publicly challenged the sheriff before, those words carry massive weight. He was not backing down. He was telling you that, on this specific point, His own independent investigation backed up the official story. Then he said something that dropped the cold journalistic tone to show his human side. Honestly, I feel terrible for them. Imagine coping with the disappearance of Nancy, Annie's mother, only to be torn to pieces like that across the internet. To be targeted like that is just terrible. A terrible ordeal, especially coming from the person best qualified to know if those rumors were true. And then came the final detail that online sleuths twisted immediately. Entin revealed he had personally contacted Annie and Tommaso to request an interview. He wanted to give them a platform to speak, but received no response. To conspiracy theorists, that silence screamed guilt, but ask yourself, in all honesty, you are Annie Guthrie. Your mother is missing. For months, hundreds of strangers have been dissecting your driveway footage frame by frame, inventing motives out of thin air. And now someone wants you to sit before a camera and relive it all, even if they have already defended your innocence publicly. What would you do? Most people would choose to stay silent, because inside the web of lies fueling this theory, there was no way to win. If you speak, they twist your words. If you stay silent, you are guilty. Their silence was not a confession of guilt. It was the only sane response to an impossible situation. This is what Brian Entin actually brought to light, and it is far from what the clickbait video titles promised. He did not expose Annie. He did not expose Tommaso. He exposed social media's absurd obsession with raw speculation. He highlighted the massive gulf between online rumors and what the actual evidence showed. In doing so, he pulled focus back to the one figure. Everyone ignored the mysterious masked man on the porch, because while the internet argued about a driveway, that man had 3 months to vanish. I am talking about the armed intruder caught on camera by the FBI. Face covered, backpack on, a visible weapon, moving with total coldness through the dark property at 2 in the morning. Former FBI Assistant Director John Miller suggested this individual likely had highly specific local knowledge, not general familiarity, but precise details regarding Nancy's daily routine, her camera placement, the house layout, and the exact time she got back from dinner. Someone was watching her. Someone was tracking her movements. Someone knew that on the night of January 31st, Nancy would return at 10. The garage door would shut, and the neighborhood would plunge into total silence. Retired Lieutenant Bob Kager searched the dry desert washes near her home riverbeds that cut through the Catalina foothills and passed so close to the property that someone with experience could have easily moved through the dark without anyone ever noticing. Krieger was very direct about what that means. You had to know this area well. It is not a place you just stumble upon. This was pure local knowledge. Once again, the same profile emerges from every angle, pointing to the exact same suspect, and none of those paths lead us back to a quiet family dinner. Sheriff Nanos confirmed that unknown DNA was recovered at the scene and analyzed by FBI labs. His exact words were, "We have DNA that is unknown." A suspicious vehicle, captured on a Ring camera at 2:36 in the morning, just 8 minutes after Nancy's pacemaker disconnected, has still not been identified. The reward is over $1 million, and it remains unclaimed. Every piece of forensic evidence shifts suspicion away from the family the internet attacked for 3 months, pointing instead to a stranger who remains free. Let me lay everything out in one place, so there is absolutely no confusion between what is documented and what is just noise. Documented. Sheriff Chris Nanos cleared the entire Guthrie family, including siblings and spouses, in an official statement, calling the online accusations incredibly cruel. Documented. Every single immediate family member reportedly passed their polygraph tests. Brian Entin, the most trusted and closely connected journalist on this case, a reporter who openly challenged the sheriff whenever it was necessary, stated he never saw any evidence linking the family, calling the social media harassment of Annie and Tommaso absolutely terrible. Documented. Annie's car was seized for forensics, perhaps to search for a tracker left by the real culprit, and returned in March. Documented. An armed, hooded figure was caught on camera at Nancy's door. Unknown DNA was found. An unidentified vehicle passed nearby, right at the time of the abduction. It is highly likely the culprit possessed specific local knowledge. Speculation. Every single theory tying Annie or Tommaso to this, built entirely on driveway security footage, every analysis of body language, every interpretation of silence, none of it comes from a real leak or a reliable source. It was all built on mere proximity and rushed conclusions before verifying a single fact. That is the line. The facts on one side and the noise on the other. And the people who spent 3 months feeding that noise, knowing there was no proof, profiting off a missing woman and her loving family, really need to think hard about what Brian Entin said, because the most trusted voice in this entire investigation analyzed their work and called it exactly what it was: cruel. That is what truly matters after all this noise. While the internet argued over a family already cleared of suspicion, the man who stepped onto Nancy Guthrie's porch at 1:47 in the morning had those same months to disappear, to alter his appearance, destroy any evidence, and get as far away from Tucson as possible. Every video about Annie and Tommaso, every forum thread, and every hour of speculation was aimed at the wrong target. It was wasted attention that failed to focus on the real mystery, on that mysterious figure, the unknown DNA, and the unidentified vehicle, the person who actually took an 84-year-old woman in the dead of night. That distraction is not harmless. In an active case, attention and leads are incredibly precious resources, and every second wasted on an already cleared family is time not spent hunting for the real culprit. Brian Entin was blunt, because that matches exactly what he uncovered in his own investigation, and I believe he spoke out because he knows that the longer the wrong questions dominate, the colder the trail of truth will get. Nancy Guthrie is still missing. The porch suspect is still out there. The unknown DNA is still being analyzed, and that car remains unidentified. And somewhere, hidden in a detail no one has reported yet, a face seen more than once. A vehicle out of place, or someone who suddenly vanished from their normal routine in early February, lies the answer. Not in a garage, and not at a family dinner. It is out there. If you have any information, even a small detail that has bothered you since February, the FBI tip line is 1-800-CALL-FBI. That number is 1-800-225-5324. You can submit tips anonymously at tips.fbi.gov. The reward is real and remains unclaimed. All the sources used for this video are in the description. Read the sheriff's statement. Read Entin's interview. Verify every word yourself. We do not expect you to blindly believe us. Here, we close this investigation. If this deep dive helped you piece together the puzzle, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. We will not stop searching until Nancy is found. Now, here is the question we must ask. Brian Entin, the sole reporter who dared to question the sheriff, insists there is zero evidence linking the family. Why did the internet spend 3 months tearing them apart instead of hunting for the masked stranger on the porch? And exactly how much precious time did that cost? The search for Nancy. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. Until the next case.